So how do you create a brand that truly represents who you are and the products you sell, as well as building a business that you can scale online? That is what this podcast will help you do. My name is Henry Kaminski Jr., and welcome to the Brand Doctor Podcast.
Let me just make this statement loud and clear. Jersey's here, Jersey's here.
What is going on, everybody? What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another Brand Doctor Podcast episode. Today, we have a very, very lovely guest, my girl, Jennifer Love, to the welcome to the show. How are you?
I am loving life. I'm here in Santa Barbara. The sun's out. It's gorgeous. And I'm like, I know I've got some haters on the East Coast right now.
We still have like a foot of snow on the ground, but it's 50 degrees out today. It feels like summer. It's 50.
Nice.
Thank God, get the snow out of here. Get the spring here. I am done with this cold weather, and I should be out by you drinking wine with my wife because I love Santa Barbara. It's such a quaint little town. I've been there several times. And it's just beautiful.
I call it Magic Land. It's amazing here.
It really is. It really is. It really is. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Jen. Like, how'd you get started? And we're going to be talking about your money personality and how that affects and ultimately curates your net worth. I think it's very, very important to have this conversation, especially with you.
Dum.
I love it.
Yeah. So let's see. Well, I'm a money therapist, a wealth philosopher. I'm the CEO of the Living Wealthy Institute. I've been doing this work for just over 20 years, but let me take you back to the 3-year-old me. The 3-year-old me. So we were living in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and with my family, of course. And my father was a successful entrepreneur. And we lived the life, we had a nice life. And so this particular day was kind of like a late afternoon. My brother was sleeping. He's a year younger than me. He was sleeping in his bedroom, taking a little nap. And I'm standing in the hallway, listening to my parents behind their closed bedroom door fighting. And I can hear my father punching holes in the walls. And so before I know it, he's storming out past the hallway, past me, out the front door. And I turn and I look at my mom, and she's sitting there on the bed and she's crying. And so I go up to her and I crawl up on the bed, and next to her are the cut up credit cards. And she looks down at me and she says, "Your father's leaving. He's not coming back. And we don't have any money." Whoa, dude, that was a lot to lay on a 3-year-old.
Right.
Yeah. And that was the day that I witnessed my mom become financially disempowered. She never really fully recovered from that. It was also the day that I took on the story, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, because my father's not staying, and he's not financially supporting us. So that was a decision that he made. And so, we lived in poverty for a while after that, lived on food stamps. We lived, in what we called the rat house. But I think that what becomes interesting about the story to me is how and what I made it all mean, and the personality that kind of began to drive up in me, right? And so because I had the I'm not lovable enough, I'm not good enough for Dad to stay, I spent a long time trying to prove that I was good enough. And so on the StrengthsFinder 2.0 test, my number one strength is the achiever. So I know how to go get stuff done. And I love getting stuff done, as so many of us A-type entrepreneurs do. But by the time I was in high school, I was like, I'd won a music competition at Universal Studios, art competition. I'm marching our band down the Rose Parade. I'm getting good grades. I'm voice lessons, piano lessons, karate lessons, blah, 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 and on and on and on it went. By the time I'm 29, I have a master's degree in human and organizational development and behavior. And one of my clients was a mortgage bank. They hired me to come take over their 100+ person, mortgage bank as interim CEO. Then by the time I'm 30, I'm co-founding a wholesale, what has become an international chocolate company out of New York. We are based out of New York, and called Nibmore, NIBMOR. And so, by the time I'm 30, I've got all the accolades. I've got the credibility. I've got the degrees, and I've got the money in the bank and the properties and blah, 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 blah. Except here's the problem, Henry. I was emotionally bankrupt on the inside because I still, even though I had proven I was good enough, I didn't still feel good enough. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
Yeah. And so then it began to really beg the question of, well, if financially free doesn't feel free, then what actually is getting me to a state of freedom? Right. And so that's where, the money therapy side comes in and gets really fun and juicy. Right. And I really circled back around to those psychology roots and human behavior, looking at a PhD program right now to get my doctorate in this. Yeah. And so I had to stop and examine my life and say, wait a minute, I need to go actually back and look at what I was repressing and what I need to heal, like what I need to reveal, what I need to heal, because we can heal what we reveal. And so I had to go back and do that inner work, right? I call it doing the gardening work in my being wealthy. And so that's what I did. And then that brought me back to, kind of working with world leaders, in this money therapy work so that we can take off the chains, that we carry around with us. The way I kind of describe it now is it kind of felt like I was carrying, like being strapped on with chains, like dragging through my life, 40 years of pain and suffering and anger and sadness in this 40-foot truck that I didn't know I could actually just take the chains off and stop carrying it around with me. Right.
Like
and that's what I got to do.
Yeah. It's like the elephant that has got the little string tied to his leg in the stake in the ground.
That's right. Yeah. It's called learned helplessness in the world of psychology. That's right. That's right. And we can actually remove ourselves from these chains. We can reduce the anxiety and the stress and, blah, 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 whatever it might be. And so that we can, what I call living wealthy. And living wealthy to me is two parts. It's not just one part. It's not just financial freedom. To me, living wealthy is actually made up of two parts. Yeah, sure. It's being financially free. It's having the ability to have the cash flow and be able to live off of your assets and keep those assets growing 100%. Really important. We want to do that, right? And there's this, what I call being wealthy, the internal freedom, right? There's the financial freedom. There's the internal freedom, right? In the external freedom, the internal freedom. They're both important. How are we feeling about ourselves? And how are we operating? Sometimes people will ask me, Henry, they'll be like, Jennifer, what does money and emotion have to do with each other? And I'm like, hey, let me put it to you like this. All of the research and science is showing us that over 90% of all of our financial decisions are being made from a place of our emotionality. So what does money and emotions have to do with each other? A lot.
Yeah, everything.
A lot.
It's how people buy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's how people buy.
That's how we get stuck in debt cycles and addictions too, right?
That too. Yeah, that too. I struggled with financial intelligence for many, many years. And, we'll get into a lot of this conversation much deeper right after this quick little message. If you're a business owner who feels your branding isn't truly representing the value that you deliver, check out this free video training that will help you level up your brand's messaging and online presence so that you can start attracting higher quality clients. Visit www.uniquedesignz with a Z at the end, not an S, .net/level up my branding. All right, so let's dive deeper into this because I feel like there's a lot of folks out there that maybe weigh money a little too much on the scale, and maybe they're even frightened by it. I know I have a few family members that are frightened by it, which holds them back tremendously
Sure.
from taking risks, calculated, but taking risks. And they basically create that glass ceiling over their heads. And it's really not necessary for them to be there because of past trauma with money.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to dive into this a little bit and talk about how can you form a better relationship with money and not have it rule you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good question, because I see a lot of people doing that. It ruled me for many, many years. I thought my self-worth was equal to the amount of money that I would make with my business. And there was a connection there. And that's what I believed for so many years. So guess what? When business wasn't doing well, guess who else wasn't doing well?
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go into these funks. Oh my God, and these depressions. And then finally somebody was like, Henry, how your business is doing has no bearing on who you are as a person. So I wanted you to talk about that for a little bit, because that was a huge struggle for me. And I'm sure not just me.
That's right. I'm getting a double echo. Do you hear that?
No.
Okay.
You're
Okay.
clear.
Yeah. Now it's clear.
Okay.
So this is like the most common human experience, I believe, right? Because money is it's like a mirror, right? It's also like, it's also like eggplant, which I'll explain in just a moment. But it's a mirror for what's actually going on inside of us and how we are feeling about ourselves. And that's the interesting part to me. Now, why do I say money's also like eggplant? Well, because eggplant is kind of like when you mix it with like marinara sauce, for example, it just kind of takes on the flavor of the marinara sauce and just gives it a little extra texture and maybe a little creaminess, depending upon how much you cook it down, right? And to me, that's how I see money. It's really just taking on the flavor of what's going on inside of us. And that's why I say it's like a mirror. And so how do we actually begin to really unpack this for ourselves? Well, I'm going to take you into the garden. I'm going to take you into the garden metaphor for just a moment. I love nature. I believe that nature has so much to teach us about living wealthy. And we have forgotten some of the natural, simple principles that are actually foundational for our ability to flourish and thrive. So going into the nature, into the garden, let's look at the soil. Now, I come from, on my mother's side, a family of gardeners and farmers. I've been gardening since I can remember, and I love it, right? I love gardening. I didn't always love it. I do now. But anyone who knows anything about gardening and farming is that if there are a lot of rocks in the soil, that those rocks are actually going to interrupt, let's say you're planting seeds for a tree. It's going to interrupt the seed's ability to grow roots deep into the soil, because those rocks might suffocate it, block it from being able to actually root down. Okay, Henry, here's what's happening for us. Imagine that we have 4 different wealth zones, right? Our behaviors housed in the physical wealth zone, our financial behaviors. How are we paying ourselves or not as entrepreneurs? How are we investing or not, saving or not? Are we running off the seat of our pants, or do we have some kind of a plan that's thoughtful and intentional, right? How are we giving and contributing? What's our relationship with debt? Are we sending out invoices like 3 weeks later, or are we set up in our business to actually receive the money to flow in before we even begin the work, right? There's a whole list I could give you here of like, we need to examine the rocks and the pebbles and even the boulders that are in our 4 different wealth zones. The first one is the behaviors. The second one is our mental wealth zone. What's happening in the narratives and the beliefs, whether they're true or not, whether they're inherited or not, right? And we do inherit some of these things. I actually had a DNA test done earlier this year with a company called Aperion. And they're able to actually see, I have the worrier gene, not the warrior, the worrier. So I worry, like I'm have a tendency towards anxiety.
Mm.
Right. And so this runs in my genes. Now we can often hear like, hey, Uncle Bob, he's a worrier and, the worry gene runs in our family. Well, it's true. These kinds of things actually do get inherited. So whether it's genetic or whether it's because it's been programmed by what we've seen or heard in our families growing up, how we've made things mean, right? The narratives and the beliefs that we're carrying. Hey, rich people are mean and, they're greedy, right? Or the only way for me to be happy is to have lots of money, kind of like part of your example, right? And these are beliefs and narratives that we're running that we have to really take a look at. Hey, that becomes a rock that actually impedes my ability to live wealthy. For the roots of my ability, the capacity, the quality of my ability to live wealthy, it gets in the way. So we have to look at that rock, right? Then we get over to the emotional wealth zone. Ooh, dumb. We're living in a society where emotion has been made so bad and wrong. Anger, sadness, right? Sorrow, grief, like these things we're like, oh, we don't want to really go there. We don't really want to have to examine that. Somehow that has been made wrong or bad. And yet sadness and anger are our friends. In fact, I see anger as like sadness's bodyguard. It shows up because that tender one inside of us is like, hey, I'm kind of hurting over here. And why are we hurting? And how is that expressing itself? And how is that showing up? We want to unpack that. I believe that our emotionality leads to pointing to what our needs are. And I think, Henry, we're walking around in a world where leaders are making decisions from a place of not having their needs met. And so they're making all kinds of not healthy financial decisions in their life. And we need to understand, we need to mine for the rocks and the pebbles and the boulders in our emotionality and why it's there and what it's leading to, what needs that we have that aren't being met so that we can meet them. And then we get to the spiritual wealth zone. And that's all about, and this is like where you live and exist with the work that you're doing. Like, what's my sense of purpose? Yeah. And how do I want to express that? And how do I want to leave a legacy in the world? And how do I want to contribute? I've got a client who, this is a great example. So she started working with me last year. She had taken over her family business as CEO, was running it for about 6 years. When she took over, it was at 10 million. So, nice starting point. Yeah. She grew it to $573 million in 6 years. Incredible feat. She's really quite responsible for creating her family's wealth. Okay. But here's what happened. She became emotionally bankrupt because she sacrificed and suffered herself so much that she had nothing left to give. Right. So she had to take a sabbatical for a year. And that's when, she's working with me and we're unpacking this. And you know what the residue was? One of the pebbles and let's say actually maybe boulders that were, in her emotional zone. She didn't feel deserving. She still felt indebted to her family, even though she was responsible for really creating her family's wealth. Right. And so you have to dig in under the covers of like, what's really running the show for me in the garden of me. And here's the cool part. Like we might have done some of this work. We might have done some personal development work, some spiritual development work, but let's go back to the garden again in that soil. And the thing about the soil is there's so many different layers, right? We've got the pebbles on top, we've got the rocks, and we've got the boulders. Man, those boulders, sometimes they're in there, right? And then we've got layers under that until we get down to the sand, right? And so it's not like, oh, I got the pebbles, now I'm good. No, if you want to have a flourishing garden of wealth in your life, if you want to really live wealthy from the inside out, we got to keep going. We got to clear all that so that those roots can really grow into that fruit-bearing tree that then creates all those apples that then create more seeds that's how we build generational wealth.
Wow. I mean, this is This is great stuff. And I hope that, because I hope that the folks that are watching and listening are saying to themselves, wow, it's not just about the money. And I'm hoping, right? Because like, if you don't have those other quadrants dialed in, right, it's really going to hold you back from creating true wealth financially and spiritually, if you will, emotionally.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think that's where, I had to learn the hard way and realize that like me being in funks for 2-3 months at a time is not helping the situation. We need to figure out, we got to get to the bottom of this. And you know what? It wasn't about the money at all. It was about these insecurities that I was dragging along behind me for many, many years, like yourself. So your whole story resonates with me so much. I was like, man, you're like, it's no coincidence why you're on the show today. No coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. So I'm hoping that what the folks are listening to today is going to help them clear some of those rocks, and sift through that soil and get it cleaned up, because that's what's really holding you back. I was just on Clubhouse right before this interview, and this woman was talking about trying to simplify her product offering because she felt guilty that it was so long and vigorous. And I said, well, if you water it down and dilute it, will it still have the same value?
Yeah.
And will it have the same impact?
Yeah.
You might be doing your clients a disservice by doing that.
That's right.
So it's so important to like try to get that clarity, try to get that focus, especially around money, because, man, you put the money first and it's just going to be a forever chase.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And when we are not, and so to your point, just coming back to that, with this woman, it's so much of it's really interesting to me, and the work that I've done on myself, but the work that I do and have done now with thousands of leaders. I see it over and over again, right? There's all these different nuances of things that are running the show. And sometimes we don't even realize that it's running the show, right? It's because it's a blind spot. We don't see what we don't see. That's why we need support in doing this kind of work oftentimes. But for her, it's probably about communication, right? And that because that's the world that you're living in. It's like how you're positioning it, how you're communicating it, and the relationship that you're developing with the customer. But when we are holding on to, because we've got that rock in the soil of our garden, that's interrupting our ability to actually really see that or access that. We can hear that all day long. So strategies and concepts and ideas only go so far. It only can get us so far. But we've got to really do that deep inner work to clear out the rocks in our soil, so that those strategies and those ideas and concepts can actually sink in. The strategies and ideas and concepts are like the nutrients and the sun rays and the water, right? They're not going to do any good if we're blocked.
Right. If the dam's built.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you got a dam of rocks, you're not going to be able to get to those, or that nutrient is not going to be able to get to you. That's why I remember being on a sales call a long, long time ago. Oh my God, it's probably 6-7 years ago. And this guy clearly needed my help, right? And I was having a conversation and he goes, I'm telling you right now, Henry, you're not closing me. You're not going to close me. Jennifer,
that is someone who is so ready to be closed.
Right. And I was like, okay. Like, I didn't know that this was a game. Like, I didn't even know that I was trying to close you. Right. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it.
That's right.
And you could tell this guy had just the rock wall up, and whether he needed that service or help or not, it didn't matter. He was not being closed. And
that's right.
You know what? No problem. I bet you he's in the same position that he's in today that he was 7 years ago. And I see that over and over and over again, Jen. I see people that reach out and then they're like, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then a year, 2 years, 3 years.
That's right. And that's where I say, do we want to waste one more precious day of this very short, what can be sweet, even if it hasn't been sweet till now, right? Do you want to waste one more day of your precious life staying stuck where you are? I mean, for me, it's a no. It's a heck no, right? Because we don't have to live that way anymore. It's a choice. It really does become a choice, even when it feels like we're the victim. I call it the three-headed drama llama. I do a whole workshop series around this, the three-headed drama llama. And, even when we feel like life is just handing us a bunch of, lemons that, we're just getting slammed with stuff constantly, no, we have the choice. We always have choice. And we can sit back and take a look at what are our actual needs, but we're not doing that. We're not doing that because we're not looking at the stuff. I use what I call the living wealthy wheel. The first step, and this isn't anything new. All of the greats, talk about this. It's the first step is awareness.
Yeah.
It's getting clear. It's understanding what's happening. What are the monsters underneath the bed? What are the rocks in the garden? Right? And how did they get there and why? That's the very first step. That's the very first step, is just getting clear about the rocks that are there.
Yeah. And that's the power of self-awareness. I had somebody ask me once, like, what do you think helped you propel your career as an entrepreneur? And I said, self-awareness, knowing what I'm great at, knowing what I struggle at, knowing my insecurities, addressing those insecurities, not just burying them or saying, no, get out of here for now. Get out of here. I'll deal with you later. No, it's turning around and saying, hey, buddy, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you here?
Yeah.
How can I help you?
Yeah.
That's powerful stuff. And it took me 30-something years to get there. And I'm still a work in progress. I am by no means perfect. But it has helped me tremendously. It's funny. I had such a brain fart on a client call yesterday, right? And I got off the call and I immediately said, oh man, that was kind of embarrassing. And it was a long day, right? And that was kind of embarrassing. So I called my colleague up and I was explaining to him what happened. He says, Henry, you're growing.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time that you've done this with a new client and you screwed up a little bit. It's not the end of the world. But so then he did an exercise with me that I found quite interesting. He said, I have the previous version of this exercise in front of me. You gave it to me a while ago. And he showed it to me on the screen. And he goes, imagine if you still gave him this, how much worse it would have been. I cracked up. And he was like, Henry, what you've created in this version 2 of what it is that you're doing with this client, it's hard stuff.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Right.
Yeah.
So I was transparent with the client and I told him, listen, guys, you're the first client that's coming through with the renovated version of this exercise. So I'm telling you right now that that's where I got confused and I got tripped up, and they didn't even care. They honestly didn't even care. I was more upset about myself because I felt like, I embarrassed myself. I should know this stuff, So I could have went either way, but I chose, to your point, to look at it as a growing experience. And when, my wife and my son, 3.5, we sit down every morning, every dinner is sacred, right? We don't. And everybody was like, so how was your day? That's our conversation. And I said, Daddy grew today. And then my son stands up.
I love that.
He says, Daddy, did I grow today? Think like in height.
Yes.
And I said, yeah, I think you grew today, bud, just like Daddy did.
Oh.
And that was that. And
so beautiful.
Right. And so I just say to everybody, like, it's okay to make mistakes. It's
That's right.
okay. But self-awareness is so, so important. And to Jen's point, like,
Yeah.
you have to be aware of what's going on. I just got to be conscious of time.
Yeah.
I have a few more minutes and I have some fun questions. I usually leave some fun questions towards the end. They're completely random. And as you were talking, you saw me looking down a little bit. I have these cards and they're just a random deck of cards with questions on them. And I pull them out at the end of every show and just let my guests have it. Nothing's crazy, but
Before you ask, can I just like make one more comment on?
oh yeah, please.
Yeah. So, congratulations, you're human. We're all human. And what you described so beautifully was how you were able to make a choice to access compassion for yourself. Right. And so if we can actually create what I call fail forward containers for ourselves, where it's actually just about growth and we're allowing ourselves to just grow. And if we can just improve 1% every day, over 30 days, that's a 30% increase in growth. In the world of finance, that's incredible, right? 365 days is 365% growth. Like unbelievable, right? We're talking about a completely new way of being and living. And so if we really access the compassion through the awareness and allow ourselves to fail forward, which is really just about growing, right? Then we get there quick.
That's it. And if more people could embrace that and be okay with that, you're going to make it. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay.
That's right.
And this is a great conversation. I could talk to you for hours.
Well, I think we ought to do this on Clubhouse, my friend.
Are you on it?
I am. I love Clubhouse.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I will. Let's follow each other. And sorry, guys, we're having a Clubhouse moment. Geeking out. Yeah. I host 2 rooms a week, sometimes 3. I would love to have you come on as a panelist and talk about some of this stuff. I would love to have your insights and expertise. That'd be awesome. Yeah. So let's make sure that we're following each other after this. And if you guys aren't following either of us, you guys better be following us over there. I have a cool club that I came out with. It's called the Brand Doctors Growth Club. And we're going to be doing a lot of cool exclusive stuff. I'm going to bring in exclusive guests, maybe yourself, Jennifer, and to only provide that room to club members. And I have some really other cool incentives that I'm going to be rolling out once we get this rhythm going, that are going to be exclusive to the club. So it's called the Brand Doctors Growth Club. That's all you have to do is, search it and it'll come right up. Make sure you follow it. All right. So here are a couple questions, right? So question number 1, if you can be guaranteed one thing in life, now besides money, what would it be?
Connection with nature. Like being able to be outside and be with nature. Yeah. Nature for me is like, it just fills my soul. Yeah. Nourishes me.
Awesome. That's awesome. That's no wonder why you live in Santa Barbara.
That's right.
All right. Last question. If you could send a message to the entire world, what would you say in 30 seconds?
I dare you to be free. I dare you to be whole. I dare you to live wealthy in its natural state of regenerative, sacred, and natural.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I think you did it under 30 seconds.
I follow instructions.
That is awesome. No, that is awesome. That is so awesome. Jennifer, it was such a pleasure meeting you. And I'm so happy that we connected. And I feel like this is certainly not going to be the last conversation that we have. I definitely want you to come back on the show. We do live streams, which is a little bit longer in segment. We could talk more deeper about this topic over there. So we're definitely
talk all day about that.
I know. Me too. Me too. So where can people learn more about you? my audience over into your world?
Yeah. Well, you can head over to jenniferlove.com. That's really easy. All the stuff is there. But also, I have my show launching March 17th, St. Patrick's Day of 2021. Yay!
That's awesome. What's it called?
The Nature of Money. The Nature of Money. So, like, not surprising, right? Nature and money. Nature of Money. And that's on Apple Podcast and Spotify and all the places. So, yeah, come take a listen. I'm doing some really kind of different, interesting things. It's more like documentary storytelling style on the show.
Very, very cool. I love that. I love that format. So cool. So cool. Listen, and talk to your podcast production people. If you have them, look into Pandora. We just got approved on Pandora. So you could listen to the Brand Doctor podcast on Pandora now.
Cool.
Which is super cool. Yeah. Super cool.
Okay.
We don't want to miss out on all the other channels, right? So as they come out, we get them in there. So Jen, thank you so much for coming on. The story about the seeds and the soil and the eggplant. I'm a big eggplant guy, by the way. Big eggplant parm guy. Love it. So as soon as you said marinara, it takes on the taste of marinara. I was like, she's spot on.
Yes.
I love it. So guys, that is today's episode. I hope you grabbed some nuggets because they were powerful. They were subtle, but they were powerful. And if you apply just one thing that we spoke about today and just not let it sit on the shelf, I can guarantee you it's going to change the way you look at money and how you treat it, and understand that money is just a tool. It doesn't define who you are. Nobody cares how much you have of it. What they really care about is how awesome you are as a person. That's it. It's the bottom line. So when you become and continue to become an awesome person, believe me when I tell you, the money comes following like the Pied Piper. So have an amazing day, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one real soon.